CSS is a style language for the web. That is what you use to design a web page, to give it some colors, some font changing, some alignment, and things like that. And let me just backtrack a little bit. Before CSS came to be, there was HTML, and HTML was doing fine, until it now started becoming advanced, and there need to be some modifications, some design need to, be built. What happened with technology is that technology, advances, more things will come on it, and more things will be built on top of the previous technologies. So CSS as an advancement of HTML. It's not replacing HTML, it's adding to what HTML does. And several trials has been done to make HTML robust, to bring that design into it. You will notice some weird tags like bold, italics, strong, and even center. These are tags which are not supposed to be. And this was when HTML was trying to do everything. And they thought it that, let's do something different, to add to it. Let's remove this styling we are trying to put on top of HTML. Let's create something different, so that we can bring that as an external resources and use it to style our HTML. And that was perfect, because if you've seen what we've been doing so far, you can see how we've been able to separate the design, which is the CSS, from the markup language. That's the structure of the HTML. So that was beautiful. Instead of everything lumped together, they were able to separate it, which was fantastic. So the idea of CSS is to provide styling, to provide design to your HTML. I have all this write-up I mentioned here. It stands for Cascading Style Sheet. CSS describes how HTML elements are to be displayed on the screen, right? So how fancy do you want it? How elaborate do you want it? That's the work of CSS. So how can you bring in CSS into your document, your HTML page that you've done? There are 3 ways. Inline CSS, which is what we were using when we were doing HTML, because you cannot really do HTML successfully without putting, one bit of color or alignment or the other. We were just using some bit of CSS, and we were able to, escape with it, because we were not, hammering on heavy CSS terminologies. So we're just fine by just saying color, background, and what have you. So we're just putting one property, changing color, changing font. But how were we doing it? We're adding it in line with the elements. Meaning, if we needed to change the design of paragraph, for example, we just go to the style and add whatever we need to do there, and everything will be fine. We were all right with it until we started this new topic, which is CSS. That's the first method. The second method is internal, and that is what we've been using so far. And the idea of the internal is such that we will specify a separate tag, which is called style. The style tag allows you to put all the CSS declaration inside itself, as inside the style tag, and that's the one we've been using so far. And the reason we've not used the third one is because it will be opening different pages. What the third one does is external. The idea of an external style sheet is brilliant, because imagine you are working on what we've been doing at Just Child's Play, small projects. Imagine a very robust website whereby you want to be you will have different style sheets. You can't be putting everything in a head section. You will need to separate the style in a different document, whereby there will be a style for the home page, there will be a style for maybe the way when you print it out. So that's the idea for the external, and we've not been using it because there's no need for now, because we're not developing a big project. And the only thing you need to do is just to create a file and call it whatever name you need to put, and give it the CSS extension, and you link to it. To link to it is on the screen. That's the way you link to an external file. And those are the 3 major ways you can bring design or CSS into your document. We understand the fact that we want the way to add CSS to our page is through style. That's through style tag. And whenever you're in the style tag, you need to be able to target the particular element you want to style. Before now, when we want to style, we just go to the element and put the style attribute, but that is not efficient. And when I demoed this slide, I said from henceforth we will stop using the style attribute. You're supposed to be using the style tag. The style attribute is what comes in style attribute is available on all elements. So using the style tag, you are supposed to be able to use code to target an element, and that's called a selector. If you see the screen, what's on the screen right now is saying a selector. That's the div. It's a selector. These are just an example, meaning whatever you write there, you are targeting a particular element you want to style. So there are three major, or rather in this simple selector class, there are three major ways you can target an element. You could either target it by the name of the element, by the ID, I mentioned ID, what an ID is, or by the class. So we're going to talk on these three things. The name of the element is pretty straightforward. That's the name of the tag. If you are working with an input element, the name of the element is called input. It's literally the name of the tag. H1, the name of the tag of H1 is just H1. So that's the name. That's pretty simple. But it comes with a disadvantage kind of, because if you target an element by name, what then happen? It means all those elements will be styled the same thing you style it. So that's fine if that's what we want to achieve. If you want to achieve something different, you need to get a little bit more creative to target a specific element, because in your page you can have several paragraphs, and if it is one paragraph you need to target, you need to find a way to target it, other method. So that's fine by name. The next one is find by ID. Now, ID is a unique way to identify each and every element on a page, and that is simply by just putting ID attribute to an element. Once you put ID attribute to an element, the next thing is to use that attribute you specify, the value of that ID. You use it in your code, to make that selection. ID allows you to target unique elements. So if you want to target the second paragraph, what you need to do is just, if you are using ID, if ID is the method you want to use, provide the ID attribute, and whatever you put as the ID attribute must be unique across board. So you can't reuse it again. So I can just say P1 underscore P1, or just say P1, as the case may be. Then I come in here to declare an ID in a selector. You use the hash sign, continue, and then followed by what the value of the ID, which is P1. Then you open your parentheses like this. Then you can go ahead and style your ID. Let's just do color green. And there we go, we have that. Next thing we have is class. I think I have it. We have class. What class allows you to do is what CSS introduced, and it allows you to select an element by class. So apart from using ID, you could interject and say you want to provide class here. And what it does is it allows you to group elements together. It allows you to capture several elements together by a particular class name. So let me give you an example. So let's say we have, this is another paragraph, and say paragraph 3. And I have another element here, which is a div, and I say div element. And I want each of these paragraphs to have the same styling. I want the hello world, paragraph 3, and div elements to have the same styling. If I want them to have the same styling, so I can just give them the same class name and style that class name. That's the advantage of having a class. That's one of the major reasons why the class is available. So I could just say style 1. That's what I want to call the class name. You can call your class name anything. You can call your ID anything. They are totally up to you to call them whatever you want to do, call them. So look at what I'm doing here now. I'm calling these 3 elements with the same style. I'm giving them the same style name. The reason for this is so that I can style them the same way. Now, it depends on what you are doing that will determine what the result it is that you want to achieve here. So I go with my dot because that's the way you call your style. Dot and then the style name, provide parenthesis, font style, italics. So you can see what we've been able to achieve. We've been able to make all those things we specify, into italics, and that's the idea. Instead of we styling them individually, if the intention was to make all of them italics, normally you would have styled them differently, and put all the styling. Or you should be able to see, what are the things that you can group together and style them together. So in a nutshell, class allows you to group your decision, in terms of what you want to style. You group them together and then you go ahead and style them. So that's what we've been able to do with styling. The next thing we have in our presentation is an example of what shows you how you can use those selector. The one I mentioned, the one that is number 2, which is universal selector, is to style all elements. It styles all elements. So if you want all elements to have a specific style, you can use that. But most of the time, you don't use that in projects. You don't use that in projects. You are supposed to style everything differently. But in tests like this, we use it to just quickly push out some design across to everything we're currently working on. So it's a very simple and easier way to get by things. So I believe this simple selector is well understood. Let's move on to the next thing we have. Advanced selector. So this is where things are becoming complex. Advanced selector allows you to dive deep into your HTML page, because there could be so many things on your HTML page that your normal class and name might not easily be able to get. So you need an advanced way to get things out, of your HTML. And I will just go ahead and I'm looking for a very quick example I can use instead of recreating all our example one after the other. Okay. So I will touch base on each of these selector and then we'll move on from there. I will explain this. There are just 5. By the way, there are more than 5. There are quite a lot of them, but we are limiting what we are doing to this so that you don't get overwhelmed by the number of things you have to go through. So it's good to start with the basics, and once you perfect this, you can then start playing with the advanced ones. Even though I said this is advanced, there are still more advanced ones. So let's move on with that. So we have attribute present, meaning that the attribute is available. If the attribute is available, style that element. So most of the time we use our A tag to do that example. A tag is more like an anchor tag. So if I say go to Google, and if you specify href targets, the fact that you specify target here, you want to style that because you specify target here, you want to be able to style such kind of elements that has an attribute, a specific attribute. Because the attribute is available, you want to be able to style it. So how do you do that? You put the name of the tag, which is an anchor tag, which is A. Then you put the value you are trying to find inside. And the value of what you are finding is target. You want to make sure that once target shows there, you should style that. Whatever thing that is available, you should style it. So let's do color red and see if we have our results. So that is it. So this is for attribute present. If this attribute is present, go ahead and style it. You can do the same to div and say if div has a class attribute, style it. So to do that, we change this A to div element and we change the target to class, because that's what we want to do. That's the assignment. So you can see that it's showing class. So if you want to do the same to other ones, you can do the same. That's the purpose of this. You want to find that the attribute is present, and there you go, you have that. Do you know what target is? It's called an attribute. href is called an attribute. Class is an attribute. ID is an attribute. So let me even put one more thing here again. Let's say, what other thing can this one have? Let me bring in an image. So src is an attribute. alt is an attribute. So all these guys, they are all attributes. An attribute gives you more information about the element. There are ways to tweak the parameter of an element, right? So you can actually target a specific kind of element that has a specific kind of attribute. So let me go ahead and give you another scenario with like using a link. Go anchor with target. Ask your question.
Yes, sir. What was the meaning of the layout?
Alternate text. So you have anchor with target attributes. Anchor. So I think what the problem is for you is the nomenclature. So you need to know the terms that I'm using and what they mean. They are very important. So this anchor with target attributes and value. I'm still coming back so that I want to build something up. So let me build something up here and try and explain what is going on here. So this is a tag. This is an attribute. This is called attribute value. In fact, this can also be called attribute name, right? And then this is, we've closed the tag. The tag can be, so you can say this is a tag name, right? And then you can decide to say, okay, you're closing the tag. Maybe the tag has, this is HTML now. It means you are missing some fundamental HTML knowledge. That's what this means. So then this is where you have your tag name content as the content of the tag name. So this is the fundamental HTML stuffs that is going on here. Tag name, what's the tag name of an A element? Is A anchor, that's the tag name. img, that's the tag name. div, that's the tag name. p, that's the tag name. hr, that's the tag name. h1, that's the tag name. Moving on. Attribute name. Let's look for attribute name. href is an attribute name. Target is an attribute name. src is an attribute name. alt is an attribute name. Class is an attribute name. id is an attribute name. And more and more and more. Moving on. What matters is that you understand the fundamentals. And what are the fundamentals? The fundamentals is that target is an attribute. That's the fundamental. I can introduce something new that you've not seen before. In fact, you can see something new that I have not shown you before. But you should know that this is a target. This is, okay, if I open a browser now, let me open a browser. You're going to see something you've not seen before, obviously. Even though this site is so simple. Okay, so hope you can see this code I'm highlighting, even though I know it's very small. But let me copy the code out and copy it inside the editor. So this is the code I copied from Google now, right? And you can see this is the code I copied from Google. Do you see the attributes available in text area? Can you see the list of attributes available there? Can you see the list of attributes available? Some you know, some you don't know. And it doesn't matter that you don't know some. What you need to know is that this is an HTML tag and has all these bunch of attributes. That is all you need to know. You know that you can also customize your own attributes yourself. I did that the last time. I just put something here. This is an attribute. HTML does not care that the attribute does not make sense. It doesn't care. That's one of the beauty of HTML. And when you get to JavaScript, you will get to understand why it is so. Because it allows you to do some things, some very important things in coding. So Google must have used all these things to do some advanced stuff for themselves and add things to what they need to do and move on, with what they need to do. Target is to specify where this link should go to. So most of the time you rarely use it, and that's why you won't really need to worry too much about it. So if you specify target now, you click on this link, it will open a new page. If you do not specify target, it will stay on the page. When you click on the link, it will be on that page. When you say blank, it will open a new tab. That's the kind of targeting. To say, okay, you want to target something that has, you want to target a paragraph that has an attribute called KK. And here, do you see what happened? Automatically styles it as red. That's the purpose of this kind of selector, to target attributes irrespective of the value. It doesn't even want to care about what the value is. Okay, let's move on to the second one. So, like for example, now this target is equal to blank. You want to focus, and again, it doesn't have to be the same example I'm using. If it's equal to blank, you want to, make it go somewhere. Or if it's if it's equal to blank. So you can then say A, which is anchor, because you're targeting this anchor. Then you write your target. This is straightforward. Then you say equal to. This is straightforward. It will target what is here. So you are targeting based on an attribute name and value. So let me repeat this one so that I can write it out. So this is targeting attribute value. Then this target attribute present. Let me just use this KK. Let's see. P. And the last one is to make sure that, in fact, let me use this one to show you something. Let's have two images. The last one is if it contains something. So let's do this background. I have two backgrounds here, but I'll make it very small. So I have BG. So I'll make it very small so that we can see what's going on. Let me do 100 px. Okay, we have that image going there. So the second one, let's do also BG. But this time around is JPEG. Even though they are two the same image, but they are two identical images, but they have different extensions. So let's use it because of what I want to demonstrate. So what I want to demonstrate is that I want the system to do something, to watch the extension and treat the image differently. Once is a JPEG, it should treat the image separately. Once is a JPG, it should do something else. This is maybe you want to be able to identify documents on your site, like on your website. If you are saying .pdf, it should show PDF icon or something like that. If it's if it's Word document, it should show another sign, things like that. So for example, it can be used in href. If the what ends the address is a PDF, it should show PDF logo. If what ends it is a Word, it should show Word logo. These are examples that you can use, to actually target a particular thing inside the attributes. So you can see that this thing we want to target now is inside the value of an attribute, which is src. So let's go ahead and target it. So I'm going to say what we're targeting. So we're looking for IMG. That the attribute name is SRC, and the value contains JP. So let's use peg. I can use peg so that you know that I'm not spelling it fully. That contains peg. Then, because I'm using, you know that this one, they're almost similar now. Because I want to make it search everything that contains it, I'll use this sign, this asterisk sign. I want to focus on the border. You know, now we can target it. So I want to say that the border should be, you know, red or something. Border should be 3px, should be solid, and then should be red. Do you see what happens? It has targeted that particular one that has P, you know, that has that PEG at the end based on the content of the SRC. Then let's go and target the second one and make it green. How do you target it? Just repeat the same thing. This time around, you specify JPEG, right, without the E, and then you change it to green, and then you have that effect there. So you could do anything with this. That's the idea. You could target this complexity, and this is just because we have two images. Imagine you have a gallery filled with images, but now different extensions, and you want to be able to quickly write on the top of the image that this is like a JPEG. We can actually do that, like on the inside like this. You want to write JPEG on top. Here you want to write something on top so that the user will know the file format before they download or something. This is just giving you an idea of what is doable, you know, what you can make CSS accomplish for you. Pseudo classes. And these pseudo classes, I mentioned it that it's a way for you to have an effect, a state of your browser. There are some things that happen to the browser that you can't see, and they are based on events. So when those events happen, or what should the style of the element be? So example of those events is when you take your mouse over an element, right? You want to style those kind of events. How do you do that? And that's where your pseudo class comes to play. So the only one I demonstrated to you guys was hover, and for now just focus on that. There are quite other ones, but again, I don't want to go too deep because I want you guys to focus on achieving understanding mastery of these little ones that we have. Okay, let me clear all this and set something up. Let's do list one. Okay, so I have list 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so here we can see that with this code here, and that's why we have nth child. You know, the one you've been using is li first child and last child. Remember, that's the one that I focus more in the tutorial. While here now, I've been able to show you the end child. I will show you end child in tutorial as well. You know, so but even though it was brief. So if I say last here now, and I put the last here, I was supposed to do last child. So you can see what's happening here now. So what I showed you guys, I focused more on first and last, right? But you can use the nth child because n in mathematics is like any number. So it allows you to pass parameter. So you can say, you can pick any one that you want. You can pick the number. Of course, if you use number that is not there, it won't happen. Then I also mentioned that you can use even and odd. You can see it's counting the even numbers. Then you can use odd on box model. Because for box model, I did this just to prove to you that the box exists. And that's why we did that card. We did Visa card or MasterCard thing. And this was to show to you that box exists. The idea is to show you padding. Padding. To also show you margin. So you can see the content is hello. Well, you can say box content. So this is available to all elements. An element has a content, it has a padding. So you should know this by now, that after that element, the next thing is the padding on top. After that padding, the next thing that's available is called the border. So let me reiterate it here, and I'm gonna give you the whooping 10 points, right, to tell you the width. So you can do some crazy. Let me give them equal stuff, right, so that you see it yourself. So the distance between this place to this place is 20 or 30. The border itself is 30. Then after the border, you have the margin, which is 30. So this is telling you that all elements has this in place. So meaning is the settings that you can change. So that's what is called the box model. That's why it's called the box model. So this understanding is very important before you can understand position, because we'll be using this box model idea in positioning. Imagine you want to move these things around now, and you are not aware that there's a margin that there's margin there, because we'll be using those margin to shift things around, right, to make the item not clash with another item. We'll be needing those margin, that knowledge that there's a margin and there's a padding. If you don't even know that there's a box, that there are box itself, you won't be able to do much. CSS units. You see me using mixed units. Very important. I use mixed units a lot, or rather, depends on what I'm doing. But because I'm doing presentation, I have to mix the units. One of the ones that I use more is pixels, because our screen is measured in pixels. The screen, if you've checked your phone before, you will see that they will put something pixels, whatever DPI and things like that. So screens are measured in pixels. So if I put my screen now is like 1200 whatever pixels. So you can actually define things in pixels. But if you define something in pixels, it's absolute. There are two forms of measurement: absolute and relative. Absolute means it won't, as in, if you say 200, your 200 is your 200. Your 200 naira is 200 naira. If you say relative, if I say give me 20% of 200 naira, so, or rather give me 20%. So 20% of anything is going to be more or less. But 200 naira is 200 naira. But if I say give me 20% of your entire savings, it's now relative. It's not relative. It's not absolute. So you have to understand that there are two, absolute and relative, and you need to know when to use those measurements. The other time when we were doing practical, you were trying to adjust the screen, to fit. You don't want it to be too much, and the reason why it was going way too much is because we use relative. We use relative. Like this one now, by default, block elements use relative. They span the whole page. They take 100%, right? And I was trying to introduce something. I don't know if you used it the other time. Let's use this opportunity to talk about it, which is minimum width and maximum width. So if you don't want something to stretch too much, then you need to set the maximum that it can ever be. Right? If you don't want something to stretch too much, you need to say, oh, maximum that you can grow is this. That way, it knows that it can't go beyond that. So what I want to do is let me do something very large, right? Let me start from here and do like say 500. So look at what happened. This is not 500 though, but I just told you that, you know, the maximum it can grow is 500. So even though what we are seeing is not 500, by the time I start increasing it, it will keep taking all the space. I'm increasing it gradually. Notice that it keeps taking all the space because it has not gotten to 500. Once it gets to 500, it will stop growing because you now say that is the maximum it can take. Do you notice it has stopped growing? It has stopped growing because that is 500. It has satisfied what we want to do. It has satisfied our 500. That's the purpose of the minimum, maximum width. You can also set the minimum, but this is not what we're talking about today. So let's move on. I'm talking about the measurements. So we talked about relative and absolute measurements. You need to know what are the relative ones and what are the absolute ones. When should you use what? Depends on what you are doing. Most of the time you will use absolute, and some other time you use relative. When you are doing something that's responsive for mobile device, when we mean something is responsive, meaning it can show on multiple devices and, you know, still behave as if it was built for that device. So you need to use relative, you know, because that should be relative to the screen. So let's look at some of the definitions that we have and some of the digits that we have there. So we have absolute length. This is definition and everything like that. We have inches, pixels. As I mentioned, pixels is like my own go-to stuff. Some people use inches, and people coming from design world, we prefer to use inches and what have you. So all these ones here are based on absolute length. They are not dynamic based on the screen. Now the relative ones are based on the screen size of what you have, and there are quite some advanced ones I don't want to touch. I will just work on percentage, right? The other ones are advanced. So percentage is obvious. If you say give me 10% of the screen, that's what we have there, 100%. So these ones are easy to work with. Over time you get to understand the use of the rest of what we have there. And that's the summary of what we have on the CSS unit. Moving on to colors. Colors is what, without colors you can't have a good site designed. So understanding of color is good, apart from the fact that you need to have a design skill or knowledge skill in colors. You also need to know how to implement them in your code. There are 3 places where you will need color. 3 places. Place number 1 is in the font color. Place number 2 is a background color. Place number 3 is the border color. All these, even though there are shadow color and things like that, but those ones are advanced. That's text shadow and thereabouts, but those ones, as I've said, they are advanced. So starting baby steps. So these 3 places are very important, and there are ways you can reference color. We have by name, which is what we'll do most of the time, because we can just pick major color: red, blue, green, orange, and what have you. So, and the editor allows you to easily pick colors. The editor allows you to do that, pretty easily. So pick colors. Other ones that we have is through RGB. We have other ones, but I'll focus on RGB, and that's what we mentioned last time. RGB is pretty straightforward, and it has 3 characteristics, even though it's 4, but I'll start with the 3 which says that each of those colors, RGB, red, green and blue, have a kind of a knob, meaning each of them, from 0 to 256, it's like why 256 is the highest and then 0 is the lowest. So if you increase those knobs to the highest, you get white. Like if you have red, green and blue, if you mix those normal colors together, you get white. to get a particular color like red or those primary color, you have to turn off the rest. And from this slide, you will see how you can actually mix colors to get any value that you want. By the way, you won't really be doing all these things manually. You will rather be, writing your own. You will use the IDE most of the time to generate your own color, which makes it very easy for you to work with. So if we go to the IDE now, we've done this quite some time. So you can just come in here and see how you can pick your own color. So it really makes sense. If you know what you're doing, the color that you need, you can actually pick color that you want. And you can also copy colors from other tools like Photoshop and what have you. You can copy RGB equivalent of what you're doing, or even hexadecimal. Even though we didn't talk about hex, you could copy hex and paste it there. We didn't talk about hex, as I've said, I don't want to load you guys too much. So this is hex, for example. This hexadecimal is still the same thing like RGB, but this time is in hexadecimal. So this hex, this red for hexadecimal, for example. And since you've provided hexadecimal, you can actually do something like this. And what happened? Visual Studio Code, we know that you're using hexadecimal method and maintain that hexadecimal color for you instead of using RGB. I just prefer the RGB because it's easy for me to say red, green, and blue. This one is more difficult for me to start explaining hexadecimal for you guys. So that's why I stick to it, RGB. So, but again, once you see something like this, you can easily copy the color you want online and implement to what, and you can easily change it to RGB if you want. I guess, can you change to RGB? Aha, yeah, you can. So once you do something like this, it will change it to all the colors type that we have. Now this is HSL, which is hue, saturation, and light, which I also didn't talk about. We have HWB, we have RGB, which is what I talked about, then we have hexadecimal. So the same thing, they will always give you their own, the same color. It's just the kind of preference. What you prefer is what this is all about. What's your preference? Do you prefer RGB? Do you prefer hexadecimal? Do you prefer, whatever you prefer, but you still end up in the same color. And any tool that you use will always give you these colors in all these formats. They will give you in all these formats, so it's easy to pick. You don't need to worry about it's compatible with any tool. Any tool out there, any serious tool out there has all this color scheme for you to pick from. Okay, that's color in a nutshell. RGB is 256, right? 256. Let me open another site to see if it will help us. Color RGB. So if this one will have that same chart, good. This one will help us better. So if I do this, whatever color I choose, let me choose FF. This guy is supposed to be changing automatically. It's not changing. Okay, let me just put it here. Now, choosing this particular color, white. Do you see what we have? Choosing white in particular, converted white. This is FF. Convert FF to decimal. You have 256. This is just mass. And by the way, hex is hexadecimal. So converting hexadecimal to decimal. So I want to convert FF to decimal. Do you see what I get? I get 255, right? So if we go to this code, and red is 255, green is 255, blue is 255, then I have FFFF. So if I do the same thing again and change this one to 0, this one will not allow me to change, but let's say we have this color. If I change this to hexadecimal, of course I'm supposed to get 189. Let's just confirm only this one. So you can see that 189. You have 189. If you do the same to the rest, you have the rest. So what I'm trying to say is that these two things is red, this one is green, this is blue. This is difficult to explain to some people that are not maybe math inclined. This is easier because its RGB is decimal, or rather, yeah, it's decimal, it's 1, 2, 3, counting 1, 2, 3. It's easier. So anyone you use is cool. It's cool. So anyone you use is cool. So you can use RGB. I prefer RGB. If I use hex a lot, but now I just stick to RGB. RGB is better for me. So you can see this side talks quite a lot about the calculation example. Imagine you don't need to worry yourself about all these things. So you look at how they got white. 256 plus this, they got their white. This is how they got blue. This is how they got red. So there's calculation involved. So there's no loss of any color. You get the same color. So this is decimal color code RGB versus hex. This is way easier to explain than hex code. So you can see the difference, but they are the same thing. They are the same thing. So this is the name. This is the HTML name. Black, white, red, lime, green, aqua, all these names like that. And you can't cram them. But if you know them, good for you. You can use them in code. So I don't even know the names are crazy. This is salmon. Like, only women know all this name anyway. Thank you for staying to the end. I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and turn on bell notification in order to be notified when we release new videos. See you in the next one.